Welcome, folks. This is Joe from Joe Thinks, and today's my very first, how-to video? Perspective. So, a lot of people have asked me a lot of questions about backgrounds, and I thought I would cover how I do cityscapes because that's the one that I get the most questions about. The first thing about backgrounds is to understand how to do perspective-based art, where you pick a point and basically have everything that you're doing kind of emanate from that one particular point. This to me is what I call middle ground perspective. Now, I did not go to school for art. I went to school for technology, so the art that I do is based on just what I have learned. But traditional perspective art is everything kind of emanates to a single point. Now, I also do flat. I usually have flat in the far back, but flat perspective, which is kind of the more cartoony. It isn't so defined. You can get away with just using the selector tool to make like box-looking buildings and box-looking windows, and then create different arrays of windows based on what it is that you're looking at, kind of like I do here in the video. You can take clumps of the little windows and move them around and make changes. Sometimes making them much smaller or larger than their original part often can like distract from it or make a building look like it's further away when that's not what you're going for. But if it's so loose that doesn't matter, it's a neat little effect that it kind of plays with what you're working with while you're trying to convey windows and stuff in a very abstract way. The very distant parts of the image I usually do is flat cityscape, which is what this is. And just ups and downs and valleys and stuff like that. Then you would put your perspective stuff in front of that, and this gives it kind of a parallaxing effect that way in the background there's still stuff going on, but of course this part of the background still, is represented correctly. The star effects and stuff, the neat things that you can do with the background is also put in like clouds and put in like a moon or the sun if it's daytime or nighttime. Nighttime, obviously, you can put in stars and things like that to kind of amplify the effect. One thing that I like to do that's kind of a dynamic angle is use the rule of three with these two different concepts in mind. Your perspective-based background, and then behind that you have your flat cityscape that's going on. And by the time that you get these two kind of working with each other in what you're trying to present, you're very comfortable and very fluid, and it looks very natural as long as you're basically doing all the same kind of lighting and things like that. A lot of people build it up in their head that there's an awful lot that you have to do to make a good looking background. And don't get me wrong, a background like your foreground or your midground or your characters are all going to look better with the more work that you put into it. Don't think for a moment that I think I'm making masterpieces to show you here on YouTube. Quite to the contrary, I'm making sure I don't spend an awful lot of time, but I'm still making something that I feel like I'm conveying a message correctly. So again, I use my own terms for things. I call the distant background flat backgrounds that are in the back there, and the perspective ones would be like your midground. So that would lead me to foreground, which is more detailed buildings, more detailed things happening around the buildings like trees and cars and things like that. What kind of connects, because realistically we're talking about a cityscape, we're drawing cityscapes, we're drawing a background. We want something that looks good and transitions well into whatever it is that our characters are doing at that particular time. So all three of these elements, the far background, which would be flatting, the mid background, which would be where your perspective drawing is, and then the foreground, which you can still use perspective and even flats, to be fair. These are usable independently and of course put together create a nice full looking image for your eye to comprehend and understand what's going on. So again, to review, flat for like very distant stuff, and that's where you can start putting in fades and things like that. Your midground is going to be your perspective stuff. That's the stuff that you're not really all that concerned about how it connects to the bottom, like how it connects to where your characters and stuff are, unless of course the city is your character that you're displaying. But most of the time the city is just a piece of an image that you're trying to get to blend into the rest of the illustration. Or maybe you're building a huge cityscape so that you can take little snaps out of it to put into a comic, which is what I primarily do this for. And for Christmas this year, I got a bunch of cork-backed rulers. I'm so excited. Different sizes and different things that I can use for hanging on my digital tablet, which is awesome. So I can get more non-organic straight lines. And often in cityscapes, and I don't do this in this one, you can put antennas and all kinds of lights and stuff like that on the top of bigger buildings. You can make destroyed looking buildings, which you can then go back and change if you wanted to. I did in this one, but that was my original concept for that middle building in the foreground there. And you can add multiple details to stuff. Again, and realistically, like anything, particularly in art or the physical world in general, it's all just a bunch of parts. You know, the background part, the flat part, as I called it, combined with the middle ground, the perspective ground. And then in front of that, you have your foreground. There it goes. Goodbye, confusing looking thing. Now, obviously, I am no expert. If you know a better way, or if these things have real names, like you went to school and you know this, I would be interested in knowing what that is. Definitely leave a comment down below. I don't know what it is, but lately I have a tendency of filling in all the color before I jump into grayscale to do shading and stuff like that again. For the longest time I would start with grayscale, and then if you don't get to the color or you don't finish getting to the color, you still have that grayscale. That bad boy still looks good. You can present it to folks. If you have completely colored, but it's pretty apparent you're working on the grayscale, it becomes apparent you're working on the grayscale with all the colors in there. Because like me, I'm sure you don't get to just sit down and finish a piece of art. You have real life things that happen. Bam, little cityscape. I generally make details within the foreground, the connecting layer for all of the abstract stuff for the city. I then will make half details for the perspective stuff behind it in the midground, but I avoid details the way distant back part. Those flat buildings should just basically be silhouettes that representing something that is back there. Now, of course, everybody has their own approach to shading, and I stuck with a very loose single tone and airbrushy shading with my cityscape here. I'm working on cityscape stuff for the Shin's Odyssey project right now, and this is like a little welcome warm-up to share with you guys. I haven't gone so far as to do any shading to this detail or this level, but this was a lot of fun just to kind of work on, because I did the black and white perspective shots stuff first, and I basically created it in the presented order. So I started with the perspective stuff, the two, the mid, then I went on to create that flat cityscape image, and then finally worked on foreground and brought it all together in this. So if you like this, hit the like button and let me know, and I'll make more content like this. If you haven't, definitely subscribe and hit the little notification bell, and you will get to know as soon as I release a new video, which I release new videos every Sunday about various different topics that are all art related in some way. I draw and discuss a variety of things. This time around, I pretty much just described my process of going through. However, this was my very first how-to video. Draw with Joe, you know what I'm saying? So definitely, if you think I did a good job, leave me a comment down below. If you'd like to see more stuff like this, I'm open to doing this for sure. If you think this is something I should not do, definitely let me know that too in the comments. So again, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. And be kind to one another. And use your turn signals.